Well, good afternoon or good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We are going to start our broadcast here in about another 30 to 45 seconds as we see some final attendees joining in here. So I'll just go on mute for the next 30 seconds and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Well, welcome to our live demo series. First of all, I want to apologize to those of you that had originally signed up for Tuesday. We ended up having some conflicts occur that made it so we needed to move the session to Thursday. But for those that are joining us now, thank you very much, and I appreciate that. Just so everybody knows, this is recorded, so you will have access to this as well as some other historical webinars that we've done on our website, probably either later this week or on Monday. Let's go over a couple housekeeping items, just like we normally do. First of all, from a listening perspective, if you have trouble with the audio, sometimes it helps if you switch back and forth between computer audio and phone, and it will resolve any audio issues just by using those buttons in the control panel of GoToWebinar. The other thing I want to say is we've got a team here that is ready to answer questions for you. As you think of questions, or if you see stuff that you want to know more about, by all means ask your question and we'll either respond live there or we'll try to get an email back out to you or a notification in the answer session to answer your question. And then that's it. Should be a good session. We usually go about an hour, a full hour for this whole thing. We cover these types of topics here. Typically, we do a demonstration of Domotz's, just general functionality, how it works. We talk a little bit about that. As I mentioned, the team is here standing by to answer any questions that you have. And even if you want to give us feedback on what we're presenting and how we're presenting it, I'm open to that, right? How can we do things a little bit differently? By all means, let us know. This is something we try to do every 2 weeks, and I always enjoy figuring out how we can make it better for you guys. Let's, in fact, I'm going to start off with the core values proposition here of what Domotz is, but before I do that, I'm going to launch a poll just to help us better understand where you guys are primarily from and what industry you're in. So that way we can focus the discussion a little bit more on that. So if you wouldn't mind filling that out, I'll close it here in a little bit. Domotz fundamentally is a remote monitoring and management tool. We pride ourselves on being able to manage the network infrastructure that you guys are installing and dealing with. But more importantly, we start to look at all the systems that are out there, all the network-based systems, and we give you insight into those. The reality is that Domotz is meant to help you be more efficient with your operations. We're there to help eliminate truck rolls. We're there to help you reduce your overall costs. And then more importantly, we're really out there to help drive what I would call customer loyalty. That fundamentally looks like proactive monitoring, right? What we want to do is make sure that you understand when there are problems on the network before your customer does. A lot of times we use the term break-fix models in today's world, and we want to get away from break-fix models. Break-fix models can be very frustrating to customers, and it can be frustrating to you because all of a sudden you have to stop what you're doing, whatever that is, and go fix an issue. If we can help you better manage your time and better manage your resources, we think that Domotz, you'll find, helps you be more efficient and fundamentally drives up customer loyalty. There's a couple things that we're going to talk about on how we do that. One, through discovery and classifications of devices on the network. We'll talk about how we do monitoring and alerting of these systems. And then we'll even talk about how we do the management, right? The secure connectivity of these systems. And I think fundamentally what you'll find is that, especially if you have not tried it yet, Domotz is going to be a very easy tool to deploy, as well as use for troubleshooting. Just to give you an idea of the type of audience members that we have here, we've got about a third that are managed service providers in the IT space. We've also got about a third that deals with integration, right? Commercial audio video integration, even some residential audio video integration. So that's great. It's great. We have a good mix here. So let's move on. Let me shut down this presentation here, and then let's go to Domotz so we can see exactly what Domotz is. And again, I hope you guys will leverage our the questions area so you can ask us questions and we can get to those. And by the way, I've got Giancarlo Finelli, our CTO, standing by. He's there helping answer questions and drive the webinar. And so, Giancarlo, I want to say to you, if you have any questions that come up that you think are pertinent, please interrupt me, all right, so we can those questions.
I'll do that. Thanks, TB.
Thank you, Giancarlo. So what you see here on the display right now is what we call our NOC, our Network Operations Center view. Here I'm viewing Domotz through one of our types of applications, which is our desktop application. It's important to note that we have a web-based application that you can use in any type of browser that you have on your PC. Fundamentally shows the same type of UI with a few minor differences that we'll talk about. But then there's also, and this is a lot of service providers aren't aware of this, but we also have a mobile application. The nice thing about the mobile app is the fact that if you're on a job site or you're outside of your office and you need to be proactively monitoring your customer systems, you can do that straight from your phone. In fact, we'll even show you ways, or we'll talk about ways in which you can remotely connect to your customer systems over your mobile device too. Domotz, fundamentally in this application itself, is constantly communicating with the Domotz cloud. A lot of people ask where our cloud resides. It's on Amazon Web Services. We are a worldwide company. We have thousands of customers out there, and we monitor tens of thousands of networks. And that actually equates to millions of endpoints and devices that are out there that are being monitored through Domotz every day. Because of that, our AWS, or Amazon Web Services infrastructure, is quite large throughout the world. And we're rather proud of that. We distribute it so that it has more efficiency and works faster for you. And we make sure that we employ all the latest security practices as appropriate with this service. So, and then of course, there's the part that really helps monitor the network itself, and it's what we call the agent. It's important to know that there is a single agent that resides on the network. In fact, each one of these dots that are on my dashboard are fundamentally an agent that is deployed on my sites. There needs to be one agent per site or network that's out there. And we'll talk about how the agent itself can monitor multiple VLANs and multiple subnets. So a single agent that, as I'm sure you guys have seen on our website, is ridiculously low price, $19 a month, can be very, very attractive for service providers to deploy on all their systems so that they can monitor these their customers' networks or the systems that they're wanting to monitor. Let's talk a little bit about the NOC and what you see in the application window. As I mentioned, each dot fundamentally is an agent. Simple red, yellow, green type status for these systems. Red means that the agent is completely offline, right? It could be because of power outage, it could be that the ISP is down, but there's no way for the Domotz cloud to be communicating with that agent. When an agent is colored green, that means that everything appears to be working as expected. The agent is communicating with the cloud, messages are getting sent back and forth, and all the important devices that are in the system are online and functioning as we would expect. It gets really interesting when you see agents going to yellow. That's when we have important devices that may be offline, or in some instances, there may be security issues that Domotz has found. This is a very multi-tenant view. So you can have tens, hundreds, even thousands of agents deployed across the world, and you can be viewing that on this map. When you dive into a single agent, we typically use this IoT lab because there are lots of devices on there to look at. When you dive into it, you're getting away from that multi-tenant view and you're going directly into the system itself. The very first thing that happens when a Domotz agent is deployed, when you associate that agent with your Domotz account, it starts to do network discovery. For those that are more technical, it does a VLAN, or excuse me, a layer 2 discovery. So we're doing ARP requests out on these managed switches to find out what MAC addresses are out there. With many discovery tools, you'll see that it returns these MAC addresses. But what we do, where we take it a step further, is we leverage our sister company's technology, which is our sister company is called Fing.
Jimmy, sorry for interrupting. Just a request from the audience, which I heard also in the past. If you can bring that as a full screen, otherwise it reads. Yeah, thanks a lot.
A bit better. Yeah, thanks. Glad you reminded me of that.
No problem. Thanks.
So when we discover all of these devices that are out there, we leverage our Fing database and our sister company there to enrich the information. So we're not just showing you a MAC address, and we're not just showing you a manufacturer. We're actually going in and showing you the make, the model, and the type of these devices that are out there. So in this example of the camera, we've discovered this MAC address easily enough. We've also gone to layer 3, and we of course can show you the IP address, but we start to show you application protocols that are being broadcast, and using Fing, we put in the make, the model, and I think where this is really powerful for service providers and integrators is really knowing the type of device. When you walk into a job and you need to understand what the network looks like, taking an inventory of how many devices are there is one thing, but being able to classify those devices, that's where it really helps you get a solid understanding of what you're dealing with and how you're dealing with that. So the next thing that we do after we've discovered all these devices is we start to interrogate the network infrastructure itself. We do that for a couple reasons. One is so that we can actually map out from a topology perspective how all of these devices are actually connected to the managed switches, to the router, to the wireless access points and beyond. The nice thing is, in fact, let's go look at a managed switch here. So this is obviously a switch. One of the things you'll see with these switches as we start to discover these is the fact that we take all the MAC addresses that we found and all the devices, and we start to see, okay, these are physically connected to these ports. We can start to interrogate the switch and start looking at information such as how much bandwidth is getting utilized by this device as seen by the switch. We can look at errors. Hopefully there are no errors on this hardwired video connection that we're looking at, but how many packets are being discarded in that case. We also can show you information like when it's a PoE device, how much power is being consumed by that particular device. And you likely saw this on the interface side. You also can power cycle the device itself. We'll talk a little bit more about that with respect to power management for both managed switches and PDUs, or power distribution units, near the end of the presentation. So we can map out this infrastructure by looking at these devices, but we can also, if we take a look at this particular system here, we can also start to look at the wireless access points. The nice thing here is that we can interrogate systems like, in this case, we're looking at Ruckus or Access Networks. We can interrogate Cisco Meraki. We can also interrogate Ubiquiti systems right now, these cloud-based systems that are out there. And we can showcase things like which clients, which endpoints are physically or wirelessly, I should say, connected to that WAP, which SSID are they on, which radio, which channel. Right? We can start to show you a lot more information about these devices. And in fact, if we go look at a particular device, we can even go as far as telling you what the received signal strength of that device is. So you start to get an understanding of how far away are these devices, or are they in noisy environments. So that's something that's fairly interesting from a network diagnostic perspective. If information about the WAP is provided, such as where's the current noise floor, what channels are available, we show all of that within this system as well. So that gives you an idea of how we start to look at the network infrastructure. We start looking at all the devices that are connected to this ecosystem. One of the things that you can do right off the top is when the Domotz system has discovered all of the devices, and this is something that I want to show on the desktop app, you have the ability, and if I open up the desktop app file system, I'm on a Mac here, but you can export this device list. And I did this earlier. It just takes a few seconds, but the thing I want to show, I need to go out of full screen. Hold on a minute. Sorry about this, guys. So I'm going to minimize this so I can bring in Excel. So here, I'll try to blow this up a little bit so everybody can see it. Here you'll see this is an export that I just did about 30 minutes ago of this particular network. So we have an inventory of all the devices that have been discovered, what their IP addresses are, their types, and in many cases, their locations, if I've entered that. We also can show a lot of detail, any notes that we've taken about that device, such as if you, not that I'd recommend you do it, but you can put username and passwords or other such info in there. This is really handy because what you can start to do with this service here is you can, for instance, sort. So let's just take a look at all the cameras, since I know we have about 5 or so different cameras in here, and we can see all the cameras that are on here. If we want to change the status of all these cameras from being important to being not important, or vice versa, or we want to change the location or add notes, we can do that directly in this Excel file. And then we can save it. And then what we have the ability, I won't save this one because it didn't make any changes, but then you have the ability here within the Domotz system to re-import all that information back in. And it makes it nice and easy for you to modify a mass number of devices within the system. So that's just a little tidbit for those of you that are maybe familiar with Domotz but haven't tried that feature. So that's something that's there. The other thing that I want to show you on this page, we talked a little bit about how Domotz can monitor VLANs and subnets. In this example, I think I have these Wirestorm systems sitting on separate subnets because of the way the video distribution is. These are not a DHCP-based system. They're all self-assigned, but you can see that they're on different subnets. Domotz can still monitor these, okay? But the other thing that I want you to be aware of is if you do have specific VLANs you want to configure, to the right side of the devices page is where you can start to configure VLANs, or it instructs you on how to do that for your agent, the agent type that you have. You can set up separate layer 3 subnet scanning as well. And as you can see actually at the top of the list here, I'm actually monitoring external services. So you can monitor external hosts or external IP addresses as well. Very useful if you're working with a customer that has a server that's serving up a website, you want to be able to monitor that for them. It's useful to do that there. Let's talk a little bit about network diagnostics and how some people use Domotz. So you probably see, in fact, even on this section here, you'll see these what's called round trip delays. This is something that gets utilized by a lot of service providers, especially when you're dealing with voice over IP systems, or you're dealing with video distribution systems where latency to a device is of concern. Now here I'm pinging an external service. Okay, so it's going to change when I go over the network. But if I take a look at, in fact, let's go find, I always like to look for a wireless device. In fact, that Ratio device, I think that was here. You will see that this varies quite a bit. Now, you would expect wireless devices to vary a lot because they're wireless in nature. But if you have any device, whether it's hardwired or wireless, and you see it varying or increasing in latency over time, that's usually an indication that there's something wrong on the network or a device is starting to take up more bandwidth than it should. It could be an indication of a network problem as well. And so looking at this or setting alerts on this type of information can be very helpful. One thing that you can do as well, if you want to create an active ping session right then and there because you're actively debugging a system, you can do that. That's something that Domotz does, and it shows you the real-time data. This is a ping session that goes on for 30 seconds, and then it will tell you the mean, the worst case latency, how many packets were dropped. I'm glad to see that this system is not dropping too many packets right now. So that just gives you an idea of one thing that you can do there. Another thing that I want to talk about with respect to diagnostics, and I showed this, but I want to show it just again. When you are looking at particular devices like switches, we've talked about the interfaces, and we showed you before, like the bandwidth that's going across. This is another useful tool for understanding how our system's behaving. And just so everybody knows, you'll notice that for this week here, which is roughly a week, we had a power outage and I was on vacation. So I wasn't able to fix this because I had a PDU that fundamentally broke, which I couldn't obviously fix without a truck roll. But so the system went down. We were able to see that all this was happening, and I certainly got alerts when the system went down with Domotz. So all that is there from a diagnostic perspective. Let me talk about some switch capabilities. We'll go to a different agent for this. One of the things that Domotz does with the network infrastructure is we now have the ability to understand how the configuration of your managed switches, in particular, this started with Cisco over the last couple of weeks, but what we can do is look at how the current configuration has changed from a previous configuration, and we can alert you to that. Very useful for service providers that are trying to troubleshoot and manage these switches and making sure that things are working as expected. Or if they go in and make a change, they can obviously push that update, but if it doesn't work, if they need to be able to revert back to that, they can do that. We can alert you, Domotz can set alerts based on when the running configuration itself changes or varies from a previous version. The other thing that we can do is alert you to when the startup configuration is misaligned with the running configuration. As many of you know, if there's a power outage, if your running config is not saved to your startup config, then things get reverted back to whatever the startup config was. So we think providing visibility into that and helping you understand that those differences are there is a great tool. Today, this works with the Cisco switches, both the Catalyst as well as the SG series switches. We are taking that infrastructure that we built and we're starting to migrate that to other enterprise grade switches. And this is a really good time for me to mention two things to you regarding network infrastructure. If there are devices or manufacturers that are your favorites that you use, whether it's for firewalls, whether it's for switches or even access points, by all means reach out to our support team and let us know what it is you're using. We always want to make sure that we're providing you with the latest and greatest info, and we want to make sure that we're integrating with the systems that you're using. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. So here, at this point, we've talked a lot about discovery of devices, right? Understanding what's on the network, how we can help with network diagnostics. You've seen some of those basic tools. Let's talk a little bit about connectivity and what it means to actually manage these devices for us. So there's two ways in which you can connect to individual devices on the network. The first one, and probably the easiest one for people to comprehend, is a technology that we call VPN on demand. This allows you to essentially leverage the Domotz agent as a VPN server. All you really need to do is open up a VPN client on your PC and pass in a configuration file that we provide you. It's a secure way to connect directly to that network. I'm not going to actually do an example of that right now because of the fact that we're on this webinar and it can mess things up, but you guys fundamentally understand what a virtual private network is and how it should work. Domotz does this so that it makes it so that you don't have to necessarily work with the IT department or especially for commercial integrators where they don't necessarily own the network, they just own the current VLAN that they're on. This is a nice, convenient way to keep security for the IT and the company, but also to make sure you get the connections and visibility to all the devices on the network that you're managing. The nice thing with the VPN on demand is the fact that it does put your laptop, your server, or even your mobile device, if you're using a VPN client on your mobile device, onto that, that network. The other thing that you can do is under the devices list, and let's see, I should probably go to a system where I know the username and passwords to connect to it. We'll go back to the IoT lab. In fact, we'll go back to this switch. So if we take a switch, we have the ability, and by the way, I didn't mention this, but one of the things that Domotz does when we first discover all the devices is we actually go through and discover which ports are available for management as well. So common ports that we discover, 22, 23, such as SSH and Telnet. Of course, we discover port 80, port 443. For PCs and servers, we'll look for the RDP port, which I can't remember the number right now off the top of my head, but we discover all those things automatically. If you want to create a custom connection to a port that is less known or the one that we haven't discovered, you can do that as well. You also can create what we call a TCP tunnel. So if you have third-party software that you want to communicate directly with a device. We have a lot of commercial integrators on the phone, or on the webinar. So systems like Crestron, Extron, AMX, where you're using their programming tools to get into their controllers, creating a TCP tunnel directly to that device, and then giving that information or the connectivity information to that third-party tool helps you program the system and do firmware upgrades, things of that nature. In this case, what I want to do, let's just create a port 80 connection, a web port connection directly to this system. And if I bring up my page here, you'll see that if I type in my super secret username and password, it puts me directly on that system. Couple things to note, right? I've mentioned at the very beginning when we talked about the value proposition, how Domotz prides itself on secure connectivity. You'll notice that this connection up here, this URL is unique. It's unique to my laptop. Even if I were to pass this to a colleague in the office that's on the same WAN IP address, this will not work. They will not get a connection. We not only encrypt the information from the laptop to the cloud, the Domotz cloud, but we also re-encrypt that information from the cloud back down into the agent and the network that it's on. So here you can see now that I've got this direct connection into the switch at the IoT lab. If I needed to reconfigure VLANs or go reset a system or log into cameras, I can do that if I wanted to. So that gives you a little bit of visibility into how you have two ways to connect through Domotz. One is VPN on demand, and then the second thing is really through these TCP tunnels or these reverse SSH proxies that we implement here. So that's fundamentally about how you manage the systems. I think you guys can probably extrapolate how in your systems, whether you're dealing with video conferencing systems or you're dealing with networks themselves, how Domotz can help you get access into those remotely. Let's talk a little bit about the proactive monitoring aspect of Domotz. And when we talk about that, in fact, Giancarlo, I need to blow this up again so people can see it easier. It's really about alerts and alerting of systems. There's several different ways to generate alerts within Domotz, and more importantly, there are really kind of two fundamental types of alerts that go out. One is network alerts. For us, a network alert is either when the agent itself goes offline or comes back online, or when new devices are discovered on the LANs that you're monitoring or the subnets that you're monitoring. We can send alerts out on those. So those are fundamental network infrastructure type alerts that we do. We're going to talk about security alerts as well when I show you a little bit about what we do there, but also network performance alerts. This is at an ISP level. So if the ISP performance falls below a certain threshold, or if there are certain errors that are happening on that, we can generate alerts on that. So network alerts are one thing, but device alerts are another. So whenever you have a system on the network that you want to generate alerts for, you can configure that. So LG washer and dryer. So if I wanted to go configure an alert when the washing machine here goes offline, I can do that, right? I can set up a mobile alert, which is a push notification to my phone through the app, through the Domotz app, or I can set a general email alert, which really goes to the email address that's associated to the account I'm logged into. We can generate alerts on IP address changes. We can even dive into the device itself. So this particular device is not going to have any what we call TCP services, but imagine if you had a device that was running RDP, right, remote desktop protocol, or you had a web server where you needed to monitor port 80 or port 443. You can enable a Domotz to ping that service and make sure that it's running as you would expect. If it's not, generate an alert. We also have this notion of what we call Snmp sensors. And I'm excited to tell you, and Giancarlo is going to highlight some of the things at the end when we talk about things you'll see in the near future. But Snmp is a very powerful way to look into the devices, looking at things like temperature, and you can even do more detailed bandwidth analysis. You can look at variables. As long as that device has an Snmp server, you can create or add an OID, as we call it, through the MIBs that are available by that device and set alerts on it. So I look forward to Giancarlo giving you some more information about items you'll see in the next 3 weeks, but just as a little teaser there. So you can set all these types of alerts within these systems. You can also do alerts, as we talked about before, around round trip delay or some of the other network performance capabilities. One of the things that we've recently introduced is this notion of shared alerts. A shared alert, in fact, I will go to this tab on the left where it talks about shared alerts and ticketing systems. Shared alerts give you the ability to integrate directly with PSA tools, so professional service administration tools, commonly known as ticketing systems. Here you'll see Autotask, ConnectWise Manage. We've just, within the last week, enabled Solutions 360 with Q360. So this is a service that a lot of commercial integrators use. We see traction there. Zendesk is another one. So these are all ticketing systems, or systems that have ticketing elements in them, where when an alert gets created in Domotz, you can automatically generate a ticket. The nice thing about these integrations as well is that not only do we generate the ticket, but if things are fundamentally changing on that device before the ticket gets closed, we append that information to the ticket that's there, so you're not getting tons of new tickets being opened. And the way in which we show historical information, even if a ticket is closed, is quite powerful. So for those of you that are using one of these PSAs, I highly recommend you try this integration, and I think you'll find that it is quite useful. So that's one aspect of shared alerts. Another aspect is what we call web hooks. You'll see here Slack, Microsoft Teams. These fundamentally are useful for team members or large organizations to do fast communications between and sharing of data between the different team members. Domotz can natively integrate into those services through these web hooks. You also can leverage services like Zapier. Zapier can take webhooks from one cloud service and translate it into, can do different things, right? It can send out emails based on requests. I mean, fundamentally, the way I look at it is automation, right? So if you get an alert, it can translate that into a different protocol and then do whatever you need it to do. Integrate with things like if this, then that, or other services. Here, we're using it mostly to alert people through Teams or Slack to say, hey, this is, there's an issue on this particular site. And then the third and final way that shared alerts are powerful is really through what we call shared emails. So a shared email would, rather than being the account you log in on, if you're using something like support at yourcompany.com, you can do that. Or if you have a group of people like the IT department that you want to send alerts to, you can do that. When you go in and edit a shared alert, you can add the various contact channels to it here. And then you can also say, what are the types of events on the network or on this device that would cause me to trigger this particular shared alert? Fairly easy to set up. We spent a lot of time in trying to make the user interface simple. I also want to say, for those of you that are using some of the PSA tools, we've got information in our user guides, as well as a couple places where we have videos for like Autotask right now. ConnectWise is coming in the next couple weeks that will show you exactly how to create APIs and do all the things you need to do to set up those alerts. So that's really a pretty deep discussion in alerting. hopefully you can see how Domotz, from an IoT perspective or systems that are on your networks, how we can help generate alerts and bring awareness to you about the behavior of those devices and whether they're online or offline. And then we also showed you how you can get in and manage those different systems. Let's talk a little bit about security. Domotz fundamentally is not a security operations center. There are much better and more powerful services that you should use for security if security is a concern, if you need to be able to monitor security systems. What Domotz does do, though, is we can, because we are a cloud-based service and because we have an agent inside the network, we can interrogate how the router or the firewall interface to the cloud is appearing from our cloud. We can look for open ports from the cloud service back into the network. So if you fundamentally opened up a port on the network, whether it was to access a security camera or to access an automation system that's out there, you can, we will show that, and we will show it here. You have the option at that point to then either accept that and accept the risk associated with it, or you can reject it. If you reject it, the assumption is that you're going back into the router or the firewall and closing that port. For many MSPs that are dealing with firewalls in general and managing those, you can look at this as an added backup to checking those systems and seeing what's going on, or see if there's any changes that happened at that firewall level. The other thing we do, and I'll talk about this at the bottom of that list, is UPnP checking. Again, most service providers out there know that UPnP is a legacy technology and it really shouldn't be implemented, but there are some instances where you may be dealing with devices that require it. What we do is, from the inside, the agent side, we look for UPnP being broadcasted, and if it is, we start to look at which devices that are out there. In fact, we have an agent here that has UPnP enabled for whatever reason, and you can kind of see the types of information that we get. And just like before, you can accept or reject these as appropriate. I leave it like this just so we can show how that's working. So that's what you see there with respect to network security. Let me show you the third tab that's on this IoT lab. Now, this is in beta. I'm open to your feedback. I want to hear how you guys either like, dislike, think it's a good idea, not, but default passwords, right? The reason that we think this is important is that if you've got an external port open to a device that's leveraging default username and passwords, or if you just have a device in general on the network that's using default username and passwords, you are opening yourselves up for exposure to cybersecurity hacking. What we have done, and this is just in beta right now, but any devices that we have drivers for right now, we are checking to see if they're being used, and we're alerting you to that. We're finding out how we can, and our engineering team is finding out how we can improve this so that we can look at all devices in the vast database that we do have. So I'm excited about where we're going with this. Just if you have comments about it or thoughts about it, let us know. So that right there is where we go from a network security perspective. It's all about awareness, right? Bringing awareness to you as the network service provider, what's going on in the environment. I want to move to reporting and logging. So I suspect that a lot of you are looking at Domotz, one, because of the remote connectivity aspect, but this notion of proactive monitoring, I think, is also a way for you guys to start generating recurring revenues and have service level agreements in place. The best thing that you can do when you have an SLA in place with your customer is continue to let them know how their network is performing, or the things that you're monitoring, how are they behaving. Even if they're working perfectly, letting them know that you're watching it and that you're there is very, very helpful, especially if you're billing them on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. They need to know that what they're paying for, that they're getting their money's worth. In some instances, I see a lot of service providers or integrators, when they install a system, they may give them a 1-year warranty. Well, at the end of that warranty, the thing you want to do is convert that into a service level agreement. and giving them reports on a regular basis throughout that warranty period, they will find is very, very useful, even if nothing fundamentally is breaking or happening. With Domotz, we can generate reports on a manual basis or an automatic basis. You can send these reports to whomever you want. You also can customize what information goes into the reports. I don't know if you noticed this, but in our knock page, I have this brand up here, right? Cool Cat brand. You guys have the ability within, in fact, let me show you this, within the Domotz portal to add your own logos and brandings into this so that your information shows up inside these reports or on the knock screen, okay? So by generating these reports, you can have your logos, your information, so it looks like it's coming from you. The other thing that we can do is on a monthly basis, like on the first of each month, just generate a report automatically for the last 30 days. So it really becomes a zero touch thing for you. And these reports can go directly to your customer if you want, or it can go to your sales guy who can then, or account manager, who can then forward it to their customer as appropriate to stay in touch. One of the things that we do under this tile, as we call it as well, is logging of events. The reason that I think this is important for you is because what it does is it helps account for all your team members that are accessing the system, and looking at, you can see what it is that they accessed within the system. This is really helpful if something does break. You can go back and look at one, who accessed it, when did they access it, what did they access. The thing we're not going to show, just to be clear, I mean, here's a great example. When I logged into that switch during this webinar, and we logged into port 80, we're not showing what information was changed within the switch because that's all secure and encrypted and we don't know. But at least you do have an understanding of who made the access and what they access. So we think that that's very useful from an auditing purpose for you guys. And being able to show this information in the report that you give to your customer can be quite helpful, right, if you enable that activity log. There's one other thing that's pretty new feature that I want to talk about, and it's over here on the left, and it's called manage. This is our global manage structure. So one of the requests that we've gotten from service providers is they love the fact that this particular view has this multi-tenant aspect, right? I can look at tens, hundreds of agents at one time and see their high-level status. And they know that they can dive into a particular customer and make changes. But the nice thing about this manage section is that I can look across all the agents that I'm monitoring, and I can do searches. So if I wanted to do, let's do a search for Cisco, right? See what Cisco devices are out there, right? I have just looked at all the different systems that have the word Cisco in it that are on the different agents. Now, in this particular environment, we're doing testing. This is one Draper office, so you see a lot of the same things repeating. But this is a great example of where we can see, okay, I can now discover all the Cisco devices that are across all my networks. And then what I can do is, let's just assume the phones, right? So if I want to look at the main phone and Bobby's phone here, what we can do is select those across different agents, and then we can go and adjust the properties as seen by Domotz, right? Looking at what Snmp sensors or services are running. We can adjust the Snmp community strings of these if we needed to. We can even, at a global level, change the types or change the locations of these systems. One important thing that you can do with this, okay, and we talk about this from a templating perspective. If you guys are starting, or if you have a common set of switches or systems that you deploy on a regular basis to multiple customers or multiple networks, what you can do is, after you've gotten one system set up, you can export that configuration. So if you have a single device that's out there, you can export the configuration of that device and how it's set up within Domotz. And then for all the different systems that are out there, you can re-import that configuration and cover a broad sweep of all your networks. It's a great time-saving feature. It's also a way to make sure that the systems, the alerts, the services that you're dealing with on all your agents or all the networks you're monitoring are consistent. So we think this is a really powerful new feature for you when it comes to not only having consistent settings within Domotz, but also the ability to manage multiple networks at a single time. Those are some things that are fundamentally new with Domotz, and hopefully you guys are excited about. The next thing that I want to show you are a couple of unique features. I talked at the beginning about power management. One of the things that you can do, let's go, I showed you how the managed switches, you can turn on and off the PoE, the power port, to reboot things. Like the engineer in me says, you know, I really don't like it when people power cycle things to fix problems because that can erase logs. But I recognize that if you have a customer that's down and they need to be back up and running, sometimes power cycling it is the fastest way to do that. You can do that through PoE switches. You also can do that through power distribution units and sometimes UPSs that are out there if they allow that control. It's very easy for you to add a particular network device that we've discovered to an outlet. And you can even, in some situations, this is just an example, but you can add multiple devices to a single outlet if it was connected through a power strip or something of that nature. You can then power cycle these devices, whether you want to just turn it off completely or actually do a reboot of that system. So this is something that you guys should be aware of. I want to invite you to go to community.domotz.com. On our community forums, you can see all the different PDUs as well as even the managed switches that we support. It's pretty easy to spot which section those are in, so I invite you to go and visit that. Let's talk a little bit about where we start to differentiate some of our systems as well beyond this. One of the things that Domotz can do is when we discover certain types of AV equipment, so cameras in particular. I always like to find the northeast camera to see how the view is outside my house. One of the things that we do is we recognize that a security camera is online, and we recognize that it is an OnViv based camera. The OnViv protocol is something that security manufacturers created in order to allow security cameras to communicate with different types of NVRs or digital video recorders that are out there. We take advantage of that protocol or that profile that's out there to look at things like what are the streams, what are the video streams coming off these devices, what are the capabilities of the camera. But more importantly, and I think this is where Domotz becomes so powerful, is not only are we telling you that the device is online, but we're showing you that it's functioning properly. We're able to capture that stream. We're able to show you that it's actually streaming video, that it's pointed in the direction that's expected, and that it's not vandalized in any way. This is extremely powerful for service providers that are dealing with customers in regulated industries. Anything from cannabis industries to medical situations, even retail establishments where people are worried about either theft or insurance fraud and dealing with slip and fall, right? All these businesses, they likely have cameras. The question you have to ask is, are they actually being monitored in an effective way? And I think what you'll find is that many people are not monitoring security cameras in a way that says that they're online and active. The worst thing that a retail business owner needs is something to happen in a parking lot or inside the store, just to go back and look and find out that the camera wasn't online and wasn't streaming. So we think this is a really powerful tool for service providers. Another thing that we do, and this is really more, I'd say, for the commercial integrators that are dealing with audio video distribution, although I think it applies more and more to service providers, is we can look at all the digital signage that is in a system, especially if they're using smart displays. But if we are to look at, in this case, this is a Wirestorm-based system, but we look at Liberty AV and we're working with Crestron's digital media products, you can see how the encoders are communicating with the decoders over the network. We think this is a really cool feature. And again, for businesses, whether you're gyms or sports bars or retail establishments that have digital signage, franchises that are dealing with menu boards, right? This becomes a very useful way to add services to your portfolio that you offer to your clients and help those customers continue to be profitable and make revenue. So just some things to think about. That being said, I want to give the last 10 minutes to two things. One is Giancarlo. I'd like him to chat a little bit about some of the features that we have coming, and then we'll take some time to answer a few questions that we maybe received here. So Giancarlo, are you there still?
No, I'm sleeping.
You're saying that I was too boring today. I get it.
No boring today. Actually, we had so many questions today. Really, we couldn't cope with the question. There are many questions we had, and probably we will not by the end of the presentation. So we will probably send some follow-up answer after the webinar. We had very interesting question here and there. So some, I'm sorry, GB, if you cover some of them, because I was following with some of the question on the trends on the thread there on the chat. So probably you have covered. But Bill is asking if you have any integration or a roadmap with integration with ConnectWise, IT Glue, Cloud Radial, etc. Those are the main ones. I let Bill know that ConnectWise Manage is there ready, and you probably showed that. Sorry if you did. We are so, and we are going to integrate more with ConnectWise in general as a platform, not only with the RMM part, so automate, but also with the Manage itself in terms of configuration of devices. So if you're familiar with ConnectWise, they have this configuration to manage where they have details about the endpoints and devices in general, and we can push the details from Domotz, live details from them. When it goes to Cloud Radial, we have a good relationship with Jeff, and he's looking in our public API to bring the Domotz data into the Cloud Radial platform. Then when it goes to IT Glue, I'm sorry to say that, again, the integration would be very beneficial if it starts from IT Glue. It's just because IT Glue is a documentation system where they want to collect the data out of the RMM solution. So we are the RMM solution in that case. So they need to connect to Domotz and using the public API, retrieve those data. We started speaking with IT Glue in the past, and to be correct me if I'm wrong in this, the latest status is that they are really willing to have more and more MSP asking for this integration today.
Yeah. So that being said, Giancarlo, it's a good point to make that it's one thing to ask us for integration, but we also need to have you asking them for that integration so that they see the the quote unquote demand for it. The more that they see their customers asking for that integration, the more help that they're willing to provide. And sometimes we can't gain access to these systems unless they open up their APIs to us. And so I would definitely encourage anybody that if you have connections, whether it's a sales guy or a product manager in that organization, put us in connection with them. And you can do that through support@domotz.com if you need to get access to Giancarlo and myself.
Yeah, thanks a lot. There was Sergey, which is surprising because this was exactly the purpose of having. So, every 2 weeks we have this webinar with GB, and every other week we have at 8 a.m. my time. So it's 8 a.m. Pacific time, 9 a.m. Mountain time. But it's definitely not very good for our friends in Australia, New Zealand, and APAC in general. And every other 2 weeks we have this webinar at 2 p.m. Pacific time, which is early in the morning, but still good probably for Australian guy. Anyway, Sergey is asking if we do host Domotz data center in Australia, and the answer is even though the data is not hosted in Australia, and thanks to the GDPR, we host the data from Australia partners into our data center in Europe. However, we have a data center in Australia which is used for the remote connection. So when you do a remote connection or a VPN on demand through Domotz, and your agents are in Australia, basically we spin up this tunnel into a data center in AWS Australia. We had Matthew asking if we do integrate, if we do monitoring of web application as well. No, so not only pinging devices, but also a little bit more into what a certain server is hosting. And the answer is that today we do monitor services, TCP services on the server. And JP probably showed the SNMP, and I want to speak about the SNMP a little bit more. But we also are able to monitor specific ports on the server. So if on a specific server you have like 5 web servers on different ports, you can monitor all of them. But one thing that we have in our roadmap is also a way to monitor specific pages in that web server. So it will be basically a wrapper of pages reporting to Domotz as something that we want to monitor. Yeah, there were some questions about how I move agents as a software from one device, from one hardware to the other. The best way before installing the agent or before configuring the agent on the new hardware, send an email to the support. There is an FAQ on our website on how to move the agent software as a data and the license from one hardware to the other. You basically need the agent name and the MAC address of the new hardware, because the license and the data. Yeah.
Carlo, I would definitely say for more technical questions like that, or where people need help doing that, I definitely invite everybody to email support@domotz.com. We're actually very proud of the fact that our first time response, which is a metric that many support companies that have support use, is extremely, it's a low number, which is great, right? You want to have a fast response time, and we do. So I encourage people to use that, and they'll see that we can address those types of questions quickly. The other thing, Giancarlo, I want to point out, we only have about 2 or 3 minutes, and I mentioned at the beginning that we've got some changes to SNMP coming that I'm really excited about, but I didn't want to steal your thunder. Do you mind talking about some of those changes that are coming here in the next few weeks?
Yeah, no problem. Actually, one very cool feature, it's more a support thing than just a feature. So for whoever is familiar with Domotz, so far we support only SNMP v2 when you want to check a specific OID through the SNMP. Next week, so in next Wednesday, we will release in production support for SNMP v1 and v3 with proper authentication and encryption criteria with old version for SNMP v3. Together with that, which is, I mean, it's a big step for us, we also are going to provide with a historical value out of SNMP monitoring. So we do provide graph of traffic on a specific port of the switch, which comes from SNMP basically. But at the moment, if you set an eye monitoring a specific SNMP OID, for instance, the temperature of the rack room through a sensor and an SNMP, you have this, you can set an alert on that one, and you have the snapshot of the latest, latest read of that sensor. What we are going to introduce next week is a historical graph of that. So you will have up to 1 month of historical data out of every sensor that you have there. This is coming next week, but we are not stopping there with the SNMP improvement. In about 4 weeks, let's say, we will be able to provide suggestion on the SNMP. So SNMP, despite the name that is simple network monitoring protocol, something like that, it's far from being simple. And as a matter of fact, all the monitoring tools, when they need to leverage SNMP, they're far from being simple. What we are going to do, we were leveraging the database, which is in the cloud, and the fact that we start monitoring tens of thousands of networks and tens of thousands of users are adding us every single day. We're starting implementing a way to suggest what you can monitor on a specific device through the SNMP. So for instance, we discovered there is a PDU that it is also exploiting the temperature of the rack room. Through the PDU, we will suggest that. We will provide you with information that something that you can monitor and keep track and put an alert on that one. That's a big step as well.
To me, Giancarlo, a couple things here. One, of the three things that I heard you say that I think provide so much value, first of all, adding V3 monitoring of Snmp is just going to be amazing for service providers that are dealing, especially with guys that are looking at server farms and where security is important. That's thing number one. This MIB browsing capability, right? And using intelligence, right? Essentially taking advantage, call it AI if you will, but looking at all the different MIBs that are getting used and then having us make suggestions based on the device we discovered, I think is going to be really powerful. And it's going to make it easier for people to set up these eyes, which I like. And then a lot of people, I mean, today we can alert when, as you said, right, the temperature goes up or down, but it's just an alert, right? It's a real-time alert that happens. Having a historical view, so you can see over days or weeks that the temperature is consistently rising or a variable is changing, and having it in a graphical view is just going to help from a debugging and network diagnostic point of view as well. So I love it.
I completely agree. Oh, I didn't know this, but basically Lester was asking exactly that like 2 minutes ago about the OED entry is very tedious at the moment in Domotz, and I completely agree. And this is why we are bringing that Beam browser into Domotz and the suggestion into Domotz in a few weeks. But Lester is also asking another thing, which is very interesting, and we received a similar question. Where are we with the integration with the Datto networking devices? The open mesh, basically access point.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I mean, and I can tell you that we've been communicating with these guys, and we're looking to get better integration. We have a good relationship with Datto, and a lot of their team members, and we're trying to get some of these integrations in there faster.
Yeah, which is worth to mention, and in exactly the same way we did for IT Glue, and somebody was also asking for Synchro MSP. The more MSP, the more system integrator connect with both the product owners, both in Domotz and the single MSP or Datto, the faster will be the integration, because we can do whatever we can on our hand to do integration with the Datto devices, but they need to provide some input from their side, some information and so on. So if you can send them an email or contact their support or contact their sales or every rep, that will be really helpful for us. And the same Lester is also asking about WatchGuard. WatchGuard is a little bit tricky, different thing. If you search for WatchGuard Domotz on Google, you will find a guide on the WatchGuard website where they explain how to monitor WatchGuard devices through Domotz. And it's basically Snmp monitoring. Will be easier, of course, when we will have the MIB browser there, of course.
Giancarlo, just so you know, we're about 3 minutes over, and I wanted to keep it to an hour. I know that I get long-winded and I didn't give you enough time. I think what we should do is take a lot of the questions that we didn't get answers to, and we will respond via email. Our team will do that. Is that okay?
No, that sounds very good.
Okay, I do need to learn to talk faster. I understand that. So I appreciate everybody joining us. This will be recorded if you want to send it out to any of your colleagues that maybe were not able to attend. We appreciate you guys being here. And as I said before, if you want to make suggestions or tell us how we can do things differently, we are all ears. Please email us at support@domotz.com. And we are happy to listen. Thank you for attending. I appreciate your time.